Good evening and welcome. I'll be brief. Welcome to the Frank-Ratchye Studio for Creative Inquiry. I'm Golan Levin and the director of this. This is our research lab, the College of Fine Arts, and our Center for Atypical and Antidisciplinary Research and Outreach at the intersection of art, science, technology, and culture. Really thrilled to partner this evening with the School of Art here at Carnegie Mellon, who will be presenting another one of their alumni lectures in affiliation with the Miller Gallery, which is currently showing the alumni exhibition. Our guest tonight is Ben Bigelow, who's an alumnus from the School of Art from 2008. And here to introduce him a bit more is one of our graduate students, Jiwan Chung.
Thanks everyone for coming. I just want to remind everyone that there's a whole bunch of awesome lectures coming up. We've got our own Echo on February 16th, Willie Doherty on February 23rd, and Magdalena Moshkalevich on March 1st. So that's coming up the next 3 weeks. So Ben's younger self, pre-MFA, describes his own art practice as an intermedia performance alchemy. Ben's current self describes it as a practice full of tragic comedies of the American experience, whose actors attempt to find humanity in consumer sites, technological apparatuses, and political histories, only to find a narrative loop again and again. So that's what an MFA does to you, makes you extend out your descriptions of your art. Let me add to that. Ben makes videos. Ben makes myths. He makes cyclical situations. Ben makes systems both sensical and irrational for his characters or environments to fulfill endlessly. These characters and environments journey towards an obsession for Americana that blurs fact and fiction, history and mythology. What is important is a search for it. What is important is a search for it, for it's through this searching, which is often supplemented or enhanced by technology, that a critical understanding comes to be for the concept of America. Ben has exhibited in a wide range of venues such as the Kala Art Institute of Berkeley, City Limits Gallery in Oakland, the ICA Philly, and the Harlem Factory Fest in New York City. He has an MFA at Stanford and a BFA from Carnegie Mellon. Originally from Los Angeles, he currently works and lives in Brooklyn. Ben's recent piece at the Miller Gallery furthers his exploration of the shifting identity of Americana in an immersive multimedia, multi-floor video installation. But I'll let Ben talk about it more, so with great pleasure, I present Ben Bigelow.
Wow, thank you so much for that kind introduction. You know, it's really, as was said twice, I was a student here as an undergraduate, and I watched a lot of lectures in this building and in the others on campus, and I think I've imagined this lecture back at Carnegie Mellon, like in the shower, maybe 20 or 30 times, and so that sort of fantastic introduction, you know, fits right into the sort of way that I've imagined this will go. Hopefully this lecture will not be as boring as the one that, you know, I've gone through in my mind. So it's really good to be here, and it's really good to be back here, and thank you so much for all of the forces that brought me back, both with the Miller Gallery. Car did such a fantastic job helping me install something that I've never really done before and I didn't know was going to work, and that's huge for me, so thank you for that. And Suzani and Joshua for, you know, putting the show together and really inspiring that piece in a number of ways, in which I will get into later. So let's begin here. I'm just going to tour you through some of my work from the past couple of years. This is called Batman. So I work primarily in video, as was just stated, and typically that'll sort of involve some kind of installation or sort of spatial or engagement with projection in space, or it'll sort of take video or performance as a starting point into other media, maybe sculpture, print work. This piece is called Ellipsis from 2012. And I made this while I was in California. These next two works I think would not exist if I were not living in California at the time, although in many ways this piece could exist anywhere in the United States and potentially globally. Ellipsis is a 2-hour-long video that loops seamlessly, so it's sort of durationless in some ways, and it presents an endless tracking shot left to right of strip malls, big box centers, those sort of non-places of consumer delights. And there's no break in the building. The way I shot it with a camera attached to my car and then stitched all these different, maybe 40, 50, 60 different pans together such that it seems endless. This is the front of a Walmart. And, as this footage originally, I had intended to composite it into this sort of maximalist, crazy, animated tapestry thing. And instead, when looking at the footage, was sort of blown away by just the details that emerge at this speed, like that sort of trash can that's just left out. The amount of stuff that is just left out outside of these spaces at night is astonishing. Also, that this is a Walmart, and there's like this eye exam building on the side. And the text throughout this work really caught my eye as really sort of like surrealist advertising slogans and calls to some sort of unknown action. So for the most part, it's kind of like this left to right structuralist presentation, but that facade is also broken as really weird things start to happen. So, the lighting, none of it I altered in any way. It was just pretty much straight out of the camera with the sort of fluorescent floodlights that light these spaces up in many ways to keep, vagrants out from sort of sleeping and hanging out or doing whatever in these spaces. So they sort of blast a lot of it with fluorescent floodlighting. But then something like this happens, which is a bit hard to see at this projection and whatever the room lighting, but it's this endless procession of Target shopping carts that sort of, it seems invented and faked, but, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I like things that sit between the real and the surreal. I think it's, I'm sure many of you are interested in that as well. It's kind of a characteristic of this era. And for me, this footage, these spaces, they look just like a 3D model. It's hard to tell that, is it a real space? Is it an actual space? And in many ways, they are 3D models. They're designed sort of in CAD and just kind of plumped down into these spaces that could be anywhere. It could be any part of California or the rest of the United States. So here, sometime every 15 minutes or so, the left to right procession is broken by a turn. So it kind of creates this like looping jigsaw sort of puzzle. The way that turns reminds me of a pivoting around a 3D model or something like that. And another work besides the stitching I did was removing any sort of lights or from the parking lots to give it the sort of floating in space feeling, any sort of reflections of myself or the car driving in the window, any sort of bumps or irregularities. This is one of my favorites. So, for the most part, I like a work to have different. If you just came in here, you would probably see 5 minutes maybe, and it's going to be a building from left to right happening. But if you stick around or come in at the right moment, something odd like this might happen. And there's actually a woman in there. Now, it's about 3:30 in the morning. It's Oakland. I pass right by her. She looks at me. And she goes back, and she's behind some building somewhere, so maybe she's not supposed to be back there, like sleeping on her shift. Who knows? And I was stopped many times by police, and it's really, oh, I'm at Stanford doing a research project. Oh, fine, like just nothing. And I assumed at least she would, but nothing. Here's one more moments that kind of stand out from the mundane, and to me, what's so lovely about what I enjoy about this work is that it's atrociously boring, these spaces, but at the same time, like, I think they're gorgeous, and there's something beautiful about what's happening in these mundane spaces and the way the light moves across some of the surfaces, and that sort of happening. The lights, I was there just right at the moment that the that movie theater had sort of shut its lights off. Or here, like a Gursky photo, seeing some depth into these stores. So I think it's critical of these spaces as being these trapping, elliptical, consumerist hells, places I want to get out of usually as quickly as possible when I'm there. But I think if, maybe if you slow down, like there's something to pay attention to. We're going to move on. Here's an installation view of it. These are some foreclosed buildings that's for sale on those signs. So crucially, this work is projected. It's not like just a video that I would screen in a movie theater like this or anything. It's intended to be somewhat close to actual size at sort of a bodily scale, so it feels like you're on some kind of moving walkway, or that it's greeting you. Also, the way that the camera crop is, the sidewalk hits the ground in sort of a realistic fashion. I end up painting a lot of rooms black for installations, and it's Kara, thanks again I didn't have to do that this time, thank you. Anyway, driving. This is another work made in the Bay Area, and at Stanford, I think a lot like here, I really enjoyed being an artist kind of right on the edge of the explosion of this sort of tech business. I would drive every day to get to school and to go to San Francisco through up Sand Hill Road, where these like VC companies and all this money and this whole thing. But I'm not, I'm so close and so far away from that, nor do I want to be. And so I sort of kind of was interested in spying on that. And this next work, The Grid, is very much sort of a parody or my own sort of imaginings of what's an absurdist sort of narrative inside of that world. And I started noticing these billboards, and there's tons of billboards in the Silicon Valley just for Silicon Valley workers. In the same way, if you're in Hollywood, it's all sort of like Hollywood ads. And I started noticing some of these that had this motif of the hand and the cloud and connectivity, and it reminded me in many ways of sort of, religious iconography. This is kind of like a typical Adam life, being brought to the human being, iconography of the hand touching, giving life, and the parallels between business and cloud computing and tech, but also connectivity to sort of the spiritual and that sort of substitution happening. So here's just a still from a YouTube video for Dreamforce, which is a cloud computing company, and in the way this like centralized abstract image of the cloud connecting people, kind of like a god connecting people, but then also like so bizarre, this culture of tech. And so here, this is a 2012 Dreamforce, which is Salesforce, which is a cloud computing company. They have a annual massive convention. It's very expensive to go to. I was trying to go, but it was like $5,000 for the weekend. And I just, this lineup here of their key speakers or presenters. You have the CEO of GE, you have Colin Powell, CEO of Burberry, Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker, motivator, Sir Richard Branson, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers. It's just like, whoa. I mean, it's better than any Coachella lineup imaginable. So this is from inside Dreamforce. This is Tony Robbins, the end of one of his motivating sessions.
The greatest celebration of your life, with your voice, with your body, jumping, leaping like you never have. All those want to go for it, say ah! All those opposed. Motion is caring. We'll clap, and on the one, when I say three, we go crazy. Are you ready? Are you ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3, go!
is a thing he does. Maybe some of you have seen it. There's one recently, so he does some Nirvana songs that's even more. He does it to Smells Like Teen Spirit. It's just a good old-fashioned freak-out session. You know, and honestly, like, I'm not one to really, I don't want to make fun of the way that someone finds their joy and happiness or whatever, but when it's so tied into commerce and, you know, his sessions are expensive. I try to go to a Tony Robbins session too, but that's like $500 a day. And, you know, it deserves to be made fun of, basically. So a lot of my work too starts with what's around me. And I used to drive by this building all the time, PricewaterhouseCoopers building. I didn't know it was a Price, even though it says PwC, but I didn't really pay attention to that as much as just the building itself. It's like this towering building in San Jose. PricewaterhouseCoopers is a consulting and assurance company. I think I kind of might know what that means, but you know, they have, I do, but it's like what exactly they provide tax services. Anyway, they have offices in 776 cities across 159 countries and employ 200,000 people. And it's like, you can look and find buildings exactly like these all over the world. And I started to think, like, if there's a CEO and what is he doing in the top of that building up there? So that combined with this cloud imagery, the spiritual imagery, I made a 35-minute film short video called The Grid. Here's a clip from it. It's about 3.5 minutes. So in that scene, you could say maybe he's imagining and preparing to give his big keynote. So this film stars a couple of primary actors. This gentleman here, who I think of as kind of like the CEO, billionaire, everyman, up in the top of this tower, and he's stuck in there, and he's stuck in this gridded 2D room, and he's basically struggling in different ways to connect with the outside world and with this hand that is sort of the puppeteer of him that comes in, that is both sort of the user and maybe something else. In this scene, he receives a shipment containing toe shoes from his mother, telling him, this will make you feel better. And she tries to do his dance again, but it doesn't work. Here again, this is just a Google search. You know, this phrase stay connected, that really was like a kind of a guiding point for a lot of this film, revealing both imagery from sort of tech and also up in the top, you could filter it by church as well. So there's a couple different sequences. One of them are these revolving text and cloud sequences. In this one, it's a maybe 3-4 minute long sequence. The pace of this is much slower maybe than the pace of tech. This monolith comes out and text spelling stay connected, exits from the monolith. So again, that connection with cloud computing. These are images by Alfred Stieglitz from a series called The Equivalents, which was maybe one of the first photographic projects to try and imagine sort of a non-objective, more sort of abstract photography, and it's all of clouds as a sort of source of imagination and the divine. In other ways, this character, a reference for me, is Gaspar David Friedrich, in the way that the figure is always placed in this sort of romantic painting facing the landscape to sort of give scale and so the sort of awe and spiritual sublime of the landscape. But of course, he's sort of stuck in this sublime of the grid. So here's the installation. I built this room for it to live in, the walls of which are the lines of the grid. And the video is not is in a vertical format, which to me is both this kind of touchscreen, the phone, etc., and then also sort of altar painting, because both of those things engage your body rather than less a window, but more of like a sort of bodily engagement. And then there's a series of these, they're kind of like magic tricks or still lifes where the hand is maybe trying to impress you. So moving on to the series, this next body of work also kind of has the hand in it in some ways. I'm going to start with this print. It's called Zeal. And the genesis for this whole body of work was just the act of throwing a pie. I thought that there's something kind of amazing about that gesture. And for me, it's exciting because it's both, very lowbrow and has this history of slapstick in the Three Stooges, but has also been used as sort of a political protest in terms of, just two examples, Bill Gates, Rupert Murdoch, both somewhat recently pied in the face by agitators who don't agree with their perspective. So I made this print on the left in a couple different forms, made by essentially scanning me smashing a pie. So what's fun about it is that it has a really sort of infinite resolution in some ways because it's on a scanner bed. So I just like that sort of performance gesture of throwing a pie at a scanner, although it actually involved way more than I thought it would in terms of if I said, I'll just like smash a pie on a scanner, and that'll be like a simple gesture, but I had to like build this massive sort of backlit box to put the scanner in so that it would be white and not black. So here's one iteration of it. In I turned this in Berkeley, California. There's this sort of this passageway where there's these vitrines, and I made a light box out of the vitrine. So like with the Miller Gallery and a lot of stuff, there's maybe a 20-30% of the work is always sort of finished or encouraged by the site in some way. So when I saw this site, it was like I would love to turn this into some kind of light box. So the next piece and really sort of the central component of this work is this performance and video. The end result is a video called With Sounding Brass and a Tinkling Cymbal. And so what this is it's a performance that I did, but it's been projection mapped into the space such that the walls of the gallery are sort of continued into this environment. And so I kind of like started doing a lot of performance work, and I think a lot of my work is I'm sort of trying to figure out strategies to have the work perform for me. I don't know if that's partially because I just think there's something limiting about it having to be my body in a space for it to be a performance, and I'm trying to figure out other ways that technology can sort of do that for me, and the work can in some ways then. To me, I find video, what's so powerful about video and these technologies is that they're reproducible in an infinite way, and they can go anywhere and live anywhere on a phone, wherever at the same time, and that's fantastic. But also, I like aura. Like, I love a sculpture. I like looking at a painting. I like that feeling of there's this thing living in front of me, or there's a performer living in front of me. And so I'm trying to kind of bring that to a medium that, didn't really have so much aura to begin with, or at least, in my experience of it. If you walked into a movie theater in early cinema, there was definitely aura. So this was at the time of the government shutdown, or leading up to it in 2013, and I was feeling pretty dissatisfied with that sort of stalemate in Congress, and had also... Through researching democracy and a couple different things, I found Franklin FDR's 1941 State of the Union address, and it read like it could have been written yesterday, and I was sort of really compelled with some of the language in it, warning against these sort of vicious men who would sort of pluck the feathers of the American eagle, which is maybe how he would say it. And how do we deal with them? Should we use the sovereignty of government to save government? Is that possible? Like, can the sovereignty of government save government? And so this character that I perform as here is, maybe it's like almost like the grid character, perhaps that CEO, but he's turned around and he's very visible and he's very vocal.
Sorry. Sorry. Someone give me the goddamn beach chair! I want my fucking beach chair! I want my beach chair! I want my beach chair! I want my beach chair! I'm sorry! I'm fucking sorry! I'm sorry! I'm sorry! I'm sorry! Give me my beach chair! Give me my beach chair! I'm sorry! 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 I'm sorry, man! Please give me my picture! Give me my picture! I'm sorry! I'm sorry! I'm sorry! Follow me, go when you give me my picture!
So in some way that's thinking, it's kind of a screw you to that person, but also I read this essay about forgiveness, and it questions whether, can a head of state, can someone of power forgive or offer an apology? And so that's sort of testing out whether or not an apology from a person of power works. So part of the FDR State of the Union, he outlines what he calls the four freedoms, which are the freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom of from want, and freedom from fear. This 1941 State of the Union address is basically trying to gear up America to go to enter the Second World War, and he's sort of outlining these are the essential American tenets that are being threatened. And there's also I came to these partially through there's a fantastic Norman Rockwell series of the four freedoms, probably his best paintings. They're kind of amazing, and I wanted to sort of cover them in some way but couldn't quite figure it out, but came to this symbol which I was drawn to in part. This is the Four Freedoms flag they made from that speech, and it kind of looks like like the Black Flag symbol or some sort of minimalist painting. So I decided to cover that with this work called The Four Freedoms. And the forms are made out of maraschino cherries that are encased in these plexiglass sort of tombs. So this all sits along with the rest, the other pie work. So it's about an inch thick, and sort of had to ram, I believe, 15 gallons of maraschino cherries, which I abhor. I despise the smell, everything about. I have maybe some kind of allergic thing with those cherries, but ended up using them. And I think there's sort of this great symbol of American cuisine or Americana, and they're I don't even know if you could call them a cherry at this point. They're so bleached and disgusting and red and fake, and so they sit inside the Four Freedoms, crunched, smashed together. A sort of satisfying moment later searching for the Four Freedoms, that actually is my sculpture right there. So I hope that maybe someone will use that, in a PowerPoint presentation about FDR or something. I don't know. I'm going to try and go kind of quickly through the rest of this so we can get to the new work before we have to finish up here. But sort of at the same time that I was making that work, this is a series called Shift and Screenshot that was basically following the grid. I wanted to kind of continue some explorations that I was doing there with digital abstraction and compositing and animation, but I wanted to see if I could sort of do that without narrative. And it kind of happened, but happened in a very different, there's a different sort of narrative jumped in that relates to this idea of performance and performativity that I was talking about. This piece is called Shift, and it's a framed monitor, and over the course of about 5 minutes, window blinds, actual window blinds, that in person when you see it, it looks, again, kind of like it could be digital, but the blinds themselves are real blinds, and they slowly open, and they cast a sort of lightly pigmented shadow, and the blinds eventually cross and intersect to create a pattern, and then they close again and repeat. But this is coded in such a way that each one of those colors and each time that the blinds open is unique, and that actually if it played forever until the end of the universe, it would never repeat itself. So it's again this moment of it's video, digital technology, but if you're standing there and you're watching it, it's the only time you would be the only person seeing that specific sort of color combination or configuration of the work. So I'm just going to move to the stills so we can move on. But so here is one version of it opening, and it crosses to create, again, this kind of grid pattern. And then it closes back to almost like a weave to a vertical pattern. Alongside this work, I saw a show at the LACMA in Los Angeles on sort of early photography and experiments in light. And Gregory Kippis was someone that I just liked his work because it reminded me of a lot of sort of work I was seeing currently, and also just sort of like digital shapes and things that you would put together in like a 3D model or something, but they're quite old still life forms and technologies, and which led me, among other ways, to this series called the Screenshot series. And what these are Polaroids. And they're all Polaroids of these still lifes that calling them still lifes, but they're kind of set up still lifes that I built on a computer in Cinema 4D and then photographed the screen with a Polaroid camera. So what happens to these is they die, and in maybe, depends on how long they were exposed to light, but even over a year they become faded. Especially because now Polaroid is not made, they're not actually made by Polaroid anymore. It's this other company called the Impossible Project. So these are actually much worse than actual Polaroids, so they decay. And it's again like, I was just interested in trying to make something like a 3D model, give it this ability to decay and fade away. And also only exist in one place. Like I could rephotograph it a few times, but it would, because of the sensitivity of the materials, it would always sort of look different. So both these works together are trying to kind of subvert the reproducibility of digital media sort of through like either this decay or this infinite reproduction, or and give it that kind of aura, perhaps. So catching up to current times is Unnecessary Mountain, which is the name of the film, and in this case, the installation that's at the Miller Gallery. So I'm just going to play the opening, or one of the scenes in it. Hold on a second. Let's give it a sec. So, the character on the right, who and that scene in many ways is sort of a redo of some of the other characters I think you've seen so far. If you saw, he was wearing those toe shoes that his mother had sent him. Seemed to eventually, sort of work out for this guy. So, and that sequence was the first that I had imagined. I think serves as a bridge between maybe the film and what's happening in the installation. And to me, that is about the archive, and that character I think of, and we'll come back to him because he's sort of at the end, but I think of him as sort of like an artist, or I think of him as an artist, and in that gesture, he's trying to, like, through this sort of elaborate, ridiculous sort of loop of technology, establish himself in the archive and become immortal, holding this tombstone. It's like, I think, it's maybe sort of a cynical, but only partial belief, that there's desire amongst artists to sort of live forever, right? And he's pretty serious about it, that guy. But the drone just like passes right by it, right? So doesn't really necessarily do any good, but he's having a good time there. So on the right is the drone. These are two people I love dearly. The drone serves as sort of the narrator of the film, and while most of the characters are in this sort of circle of this loop, this narrative, his narrative is about getting to that mountain in the back, which maybe that's a unnecessary mountain. That might be also the Tin Cup Mountains in the Bitterroot Valley in Montana. The gentleman on the left is Weston Jones. He lives in Montana. I spent some time in Montana as a child, and I did this past summer making this film. Weston Jones is a fireman, and he is an educator, and he is a what else? He does like pretty much everything that you could possibly imagine someone to do. The man on the right is Werner Herzog. And so I'm sort of substituting Weston Jones, who I sometimes worked for as the narrator of the Herzogian narrator. Weston's one of those people who's very quick to give you, a full life's lesson that, some of that lesson is maybe or very questionable in terms of its, maybe there's some sexism in there. Like, I don't know, he's kind of breaking some rules a little bit, but he'll go on a full story, even though he's maybe just like pounding a post into the, ground or something like that. So he seemed like the perfect person to narrate and to ask questions like, what does success mean today? And where do you find happiness? And, what makes a man a man? And so those are the questions I was asking Weston. That became the voiceover for the drone. The drone interacts with a variety of characters who are all sort of lost and fighting and also working. I would say they're working. I call him the man at night. And here he's waving to the drone. He, for about 6 or 7 minutes, is more or less lost. But he's sort of performing being lost. And he's being illuminated by these two women holding these cubed lights and followed around by a camera crew. And he also has a GoPro on his head. So I sort of imagined this is some kind of like maybe future entertainment. This is like the existential entertainment of just watching someone lost in the woods. Like, I would probably never leave my house if I could watch that. But this sort of thing has been imagined before. This was a very influential movie to me growing up. It's called The Running Man. It's an Arnold Schwarzenegger film. He's trapped into this reality show where they sort of launch him into an obstacle course environment and hunt him down. There's cameras everywhere following them around. So he's kind of like that guy. But it's not just fiction. This is
Nature Man enjoying it so much he decided to take a little ride down.
Advertising campaign by Wieden & Kennedy, which is one of the most successful and well-known advertising companies for Old Spice, where they use through Twitch TV, which is a kind of gaming service, put this guy in the middle of the woods. They set up some sort of environment and rules and things to play with him, but for the most part, for 6 hours a day, you could just tell this guy what to do online.
Why don't you send in some random words that you would like Nature Man?
So he's sucking on a pine cone.
Top of his voice.
Now the prompt, and there's a narrator, and the narrator said, "Well, send in some things he can just randomly yell." Oh, right now it's forge a weapon for survival.
To forge a weapon for survival. You never know quite who or what you're going to meet in nature.
is he's just like whacking nothing. I mean, in some ways, like this is the most avant-garde thing I've seen in a while, you know. And what is he doing? And then, you know, and then he just starts screaming out like inside jokes from
Now,
high
just to
school
be
kids.
clear, in your chat window.
So that's kind of this guy. In this scene, he runs into a tree and he imagines better times. Passed out reading Bill Clinton's book called Giving. And then snap back. A lot of this film, there's characters that are sort of imaging and re-imaging themselves through sort of this network of technology and cameras, and so in this instance, you know, he's implicit in his own being lost, which, you know, for me, I think is a parallel to the psychology of like you have to perform your own existential angst. You know, it doesn't just happen, and sometimes you can maybe overperform it. There's those of us that maybe overperform it. So he's that guy, but everyone is looking, you know, sort of like deeply into themselves for meaning. Including this guy. So, you know, these are all male characters. And, you know, I see this guy as like, he's really reaching to be one of the greats, you know, and to make a difference in whatever field it is he's in. You know, like, did you hear that, like, CERN recently, the speed of lights has been broken? Have you heard that? That recently they detect come on, this is Carnegie Mellon. No one knows that CERN, they recently measured particles traveling faster than the speed of light? Okay, there's not, of course. But that's, like, absurd. The hubris of that, right? Like, come on, guys. It's just, look, anyway, that guy on the bike there. So he's part of this, you know, obsession of ambition. But he's not really going anywhere. He spends most of his time on hold. And while he's on hold, he imagines further ways to, you know, reach his ambitious goal. I mean, they're all kind of artists, these characters. You know, this is like he's made a few of these drawings. So, but then it snaps back. This is where he lives. Fog plays a role throughout the film. You know, right when he's maybe going to see the things that he needs to see, or we're going to see that thing rather. You know, it's just mystery. It's pure mystery in fog through the telescope. And he's sort of chained to his position through a large chain in the ceiling, and he imagines, you know, what would it be like for a basketball to go through there, and if I were free? And then we snap to a classroom playing that footage. So maybe we're back with this character on the right, who is maybe his author. So yeah, so this character I think of as some kind of artist character. I think of him something like this mythology, you know, of someone like Robert Smithson, or here's Tony Tassett on the right performing as Robert Smithson for a photograph. You know, the great sort of like masculine artist taming the landscape. I love this photo just because of how like it's like barely putting the shovel in, like but he looks so clean. I think it's a really, really funny photograph. And the white suit. So we've seen a lot of white suits in that role. But this guy's does not have his stuff together quite as much as Robert Smithson, I would say. So the genesis of this sequence actually came from a workshop that I led in Hamilton, Montana, which is a small town in the Bitterroot Valley. And there's a filmmaking after-school program there. And so I came in there to do a workshop, and I wasn't sure what to do, but I wanted to do something because I knew they were doing very traditional film filmmaking stuff, and I wanted to kind of talk to them about this blurring of art and life that maybe if you reduce sort of like the goal of the avant-garde is like maybe to try and blur art and life, which I don't know, I think is like totally impossible, but I wanted to give that to them. So I led a workshop that was also fodder for my film. So the whole time I'm leading this workshop is also being filmed. And the workshop kind of takes the format of one of these 24-hour film festival contests. I don't know if you've seen these, but basically in a certain amount of time, people are supposed to, or groups are supposed to make short films based on some criteria like props. So in the top left, that's an audio book about Y2K. Okay, this is a perfect time to zone in on this. So here it says, look at that, the millennial bomb, 1999 plus 1 equals question mark. So that was one of the props that they were given. Just a whole different, on the top right are all these bags of props. Bottom right, at the end, it was actual contest. I had, I think, $30 in gold coins that I gave out to them because it's got to be real prize, like real life. It's money, is the prize. So they got money. And on the left are the judges, which are my two parents, because I don't know who else would Skype in at like 2 PM to be judges. And on the bottom left is the film. And so what's really fun for me was to kind of like outsource the filmmaking process, because they're making their short films and then I use that footage in mine. And we're all kind of in each other's films, as we're walking around in this. It's actually a riverbed that is usually dry at that time of year, but exceptionally dry because of the Western sort of drought crisis going on. But it was fun to work with these kids. I mean, this was the slapstick group, so they had to kind of like perform their narrative through slapstick. And throughout, I'm sort of checking a watch, and I'm whistling to sort of direct them, which is mostly added after the fact. But I was walking around like whistling at them, and they're like, "What do the whistles mean?" I was like, "Nothing. Like, don't worry. Like, it's fine. Just keep going. Like, I'm just gonna be whistling at you. It's okay." And they're like, "Okay, like, whatever." But I just kind of, I wanted to screw with them because they're from a place and they've never seen anything like this. And I think they felt like, well, you need to have a script and a plan. And I was like, you don't need any of those. You need like some sort of rules and boundaries, but not a script. He did a great handstand. So he's very, he's quite serious. He's got his toe shoes. And then at the end, he picks up the drone. Drone filming that woman this is sort of kneeling, also filming the drone. And here we're back, towards the end. The drone makes it into the mountain range, but ultimately doesn't really find anything. And it cuts to this shot of the drone being piloted by the 3 characters. So if we zoom out at this moment, the sequence of the installation takes place. So let me play that. It actually was not working properly at the opening. There's fog that travels up into this cube, and it just got pinched like a garden hose accidentally at the last second, but you can go and see there on the right. This one not playing. Shoot. I was just supposed to play at the same time, sorry. Let's see. So as the cube fills up with smoke, so does this screen behind the monitor, which is where the video feed is coming out of that security camera down to this room, and it simulates the smoke that's in the movie, and my thinking, what I like about this is, this cube is mirrored, and you can't really see inside of it, and then when it's a two-way mirror, so when the light comes through it, it's then transparent, and you were all there and you saw inside and there was nothing. But it's supposed to be as it's smoke, and it's like you can't really see what's inside of it. So it's this continual blocking of sort of understanding and visibility. So all of the cabling is really visible, which is important to me. I kind of the this quote here: "Modernism lies in the use of characteristic methods of the discipline to criticize the discipline itself. Modernism used art to call attention to art. The limitations that constitute the medium of painting, the flat surface, the shape of the support, the properties of the pigment, came to be regarded as positive factors and were acknowledged openly." So to me, the same way that, maybe like you could think of a painting as it's an image of something, or it's paint on a canvas that's stretched across wood. It's kind of like, can an HDMI cable like be an art material, and like how can that sort of work into the artwork? And for me, it traces sort of the thought map of the installation and makes a sort of drawing in and of itself. And some of this comes from, when I was like a student here, someone like Jason Rhodes, who has these complex cause and effect systems that he develops in his installations here, even involving a fog machine. So that's a sort of maximalist, crazy installation. But then, the minimal, Larry Bell and Robert Morris, but sort of combining those. I mean, in one way, it's a minimalist cube, but then it's connected to this system through on the left. The cables sort of go down, split through the floor, and then they fill up every 30 minutes or so. And what's interesting to me, back to this idea of a video that performs or that has an aura. I also like that, you can miss it. I like when artwork has different experiences. Like, oh, did you see that thing when the cube filled up? Like, no, I missed that. Like, oh, like I like that, like a performance, depending on where you sit, maybe what time you came in to the performance. There's a variety of factors that make it very specific sort of to you and to when you were there. So that's, I think, important to what I'm trying to do in a piece like this. So there's that smoke again. This is actually from in the film itself. And then it loops back. And, I kind of thought about, when I was thinking about what I was going to do for the show and I was making the film, I thought, well, what would this character, if this character is an artist in the film, like what would he do? You do this kind of like over the top piece that maybe reflected something like he's doing in this still here with the tombstone and the generator and the TV and that sort of thing. So I don't know, I like that idea too, like trying to inhabit the character in the film to help generate work. So that's what I have. And I guess we have maybe 10 minutes or so for questions. Thank you for listening.